Let's find out what is on the mind tonight of Dean Cheng, Senior Research Fellow and at the Asian Studies Center of the Heritage Foundation. And thanks for joining us tonight, Dean.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you aboard this evening. The Associated Press, although we're getting no official reason here, but the Associated Press is reporting that the State Department says it ordered the consulate to close within 72 hours after charging the Chinese agents have tried to steal data from the Texas A&M Medical System statewide and the University of Texas Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. So the Associated Press may have revealed more details of precisely why, if we're in a problem with the Chinese, that the Houston consulate itself was targeted. Your thoughts?
Well, hard to say. It depends on what further information is released by the State Department and DOJ. What's interesting is that we have seen in the last several weeks a wave of U.S. actions. The Department of Justice, as you note, just indicted 2 Chinese citizens. Before that, we've announced many arrests and investigations of Americans who were doing the 1,000 Talent program, where China is trying to scoop up as much scientific knowledge as possible. And these were people who were essentially on the Chinese payroll, often refusing to disclose that they were on the payroll while taking money from our own National Academy of Sciences, DARPA, and other places. And, of course, Chinese theft of intellectual property is a matter of record.
Yeah. And on it goes, and of course seizing international waters by building artificial islands. I mean, it's hard to imagine an arena in which the Chinese have not been engaged in some kind of activity that's contrary to what they have agreed not to do. As we look at the circumstances in this particular case, the one interesting item that caught my eye was the timing. I don't know if, in fact, the election coming up in a few months is part of this or not. Certainly, I would think that if, in fact, we had just recently found that the Chinese were trying to steal data from the Texas A&M Medical System statewide, the University of Texas Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, that might explain the timing. I mean, the timing is an interesting question.
Well, with all due respect to Senator King, one has to wonder a couple of things. First off, would he be so concerned about timing if it was President Hillary Clinton who was who was president when these arrests were occurring?
Fair question.
And second of all, would he basically prefer that we not arrest these people? Investigations take time. This is not something that you can actually key to outside things like elections. But I suppose perhaps he would feel better if President Trump, in order to not taint this with electoral issues, just said, you know what, why don't we wait and let them keep on stealing till after November?
Yeah, and that, again, that hardly strikes me as a reasonable answer either. I mean, I would honestly have to say this, that I think that when Mao Zedong died and power transferred, and you had this immense power that had been for some years been a nuclear power, the largest population on the planet, and I thought the effort to reach out and to try and bring them into the family of nations was worthwhile. I did. Past tense. I think it was a failure. And your thoughts?
Well, first off, one of the things is it's impossible. What is it Yogi Berra said? It's really hard to predict the future, especially because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
In 1972, why did we open relations with China? Because we wanted an ally against the Soviet Union. And here was this giant power, most populous country in the world, on the Soviet flank. That was why we opened it up. It wasn't economics. It wasn't, to create a market, much as we'd like to think so. It wasn't to liberate the Chinese people. We made a bet in the 1990s that China would liberalize politically, which, as you say, it was a not unreasonable bet, but we bet wrong. The problem is that since say, 2006, 2007, the Chinese have also become much more assertive, building islands in the South China Sea, nearly ramming U.S. warships in the South China Sea, barrel rolling around American aircraft in the East China Sea. And we've generally not responded. And if one thing that ensures that you have bad behavior is not cracking down on earlier bad behavior.
And something else that I think we should keep in mind, too, and that is the money factor. That frankly, a 1.6 billion Chinese market, especially a market that is not only huge, but increasingly with buying power. There are more people that are, in fact, not just walking, but buying scooters. In some cases, they're not just buying scooters anymore, they're buying cars. There's a market there. And a lot of people are very interested in making a lot of money in China. Maybe the most egregious example of the current era would be the National Basketball Association, which, of course, has wasted no time allowing pretty severe criticism of its own country on more than one occasion. But boy, when it comes to the Chinese and what they're doing behind their borders, the NBA it's like you touched them with a cattle prod. They dare not talk about this. They're desperately afraid of losing that money. Now, I can understand that, but I hardly can put that right up there with the great clarion calls for freedom as a principled move. This is the principle here, is the kind of principle that comes with interest.
Well, the Chinese, it is important to recognize that while there is a large market, the Chinese limit your access to that market. Now, the NBA, folks like that, it's not as though the Chinese are competing in terms of creating an alternative basketball system. But if you take a look, it's not like China lets all movies in. It's not like China lets American companies run freely in China. So if you go to China, they first off impose a lot of requirements about intellectual property and things that you have to hand over simply to set up shop. And this is becoming better and better known. They pretty much impose a limit on how much market share you can have. Get too big, become too powerful, become too big a factor in the Chinese market, they will crack down on you. So there's a limit to how much money they will let you make in China.